Hi, I'm Tracie Goodman, and I am the Agriculture and Natural Resource Extension Agent for McCreary County Cooperative Extension. Today I'm going to talk about seed starting, which if you've been following our Facebook page, you've seen Miss Ashley's done several videos on seed starting. She's got a lot of things going over here that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Today I'm mostly going to focus on starting your more warm season plants, which now is about the time to start those. You want to start things like peppers, tomatoes, all of that stuff about 6 to 8 weeks out to your planting date. So the safe planting date for our region is considered to be around the last day of April for frost tender plants. So these are things like your tropical varieties, like your peppers, tomatoes, all the things that you think about putting into a summer vegetable garden. So keeping that in mind, I would get to that date, kind of look ahead for your more 10-day forecast, see what's on the horizon, because last year in May we actually had a hard freeze around May 10th. So just keep in mind that that could happen. Personally, I am probably going to wait until after the second week of May to plant my stuff. So that is why I'm starting some warm season stuff today. And then I'm also going to start some stuff like herbs today. So not everything is necessary to start from seed indoors. The things that I'm starting today are particularly slow starting things. So tomatoes, they take a while to grow into healthy transplants, and you want to preferably start those indoors if you can, so that you can get them up to a healthy size before you actually put them in your garden. These are also things like peppers. Those are very slow to start. Herbs are definitely very slow to start and form a healthy plant. You certainly can plant them directly from seed. I have done that before in containers, but today I'm going to be starting those ahead of time. And you might ask, why would I even want to start my own seeds? One of the benefits to starting your own seeds is that there is such a wide variety of selection in seeds versus buying transplants. So if you buy commercially started transplants, you're probably only going to see a few varieties on the shelf to choose from. Whereas if you purchase your own seeds, seed catalogs are full of varieties of things like tomatoes, peppers, all the things that you want in your garden. So if you want to try a different variety, I recommend starting your own transplants. So today I'm going to talk about a couple of different methods. Miss Ashley has already showed us several really great methods. They do actually sell something like this, which is called a 72 cell mini greenhouse. Now this has the trays, which are these little cell trays. They're about this deep, and they have the drainage holes on the bottom. So it comes with several of those that you can also break apart. It comes with the bottom tray, which is for bottom watering. This does not have holes in the bottom, so this is for the purpose of bottom watering, and it catches your water as you water your seeds. And this is the actual greenhouse part. So this is the dome that you put over the top of it after you plant your seeds and coax them into germination. So this traps your humidity and your moisture and your heat all in there, and it helps your seeds to germinate. But once your seeds actually germinate, you want to remove this because you don't want to kill them out. You don't want to provide them with too much of a good thing. So just keep that in mind. If you use something like this, you want to put it on until your seeds germinate and then remove it to let them grow. Now, another option that you have in lieu of something like this is to just plant them into trays or whatever your pot is going to be for your seed starting, and cover them in a plastic bag. That's a very easy fix to that. So as you can see, these little holes are pretty small. You can optionally start in larger pots if you want to. So I have another option here, just some plastic party cups. Now these make really good containers for planting things like tomatoes, peppers, things that are going to need to be up potted or potted into a larger pot in a few weeks. So I'm actually not going to use these today, but this is a great option. You can also use paper cups. You can use things like an egg carton. That's a really great seed starting container. The cardboard egg cartons. You can use peat pots. They sell those. Those are the advantage of using a peat pot is actually that you can plant it directly in the ground when you get done. So you don't have to take your plants out of these little plastic containers. You can just stick the pot in the ground and it's ready to go. So now let's talk about your growing medium for seed starting. For today, I have this, which is actually labeled as a seed starting mix. Now you can find this in a variety of packaging and by a variety of different brands at your local garden center. But the important thing here is what it is a mixture of. So this one in particular is a peat mixture. You can use any kind of mixture along those lines. Peat moss mixed with the perlite. So those are traditionally things like potting soil. The important thing that you want to make sure of is that it is sterile, which means that it is free of any insects and diseases when you plant your seeds in it. And later you are going to have to up pot using a potting soil medium. So the benefit to using something like this, because seed starting medium is fairly more expensive than just average potting soil, is that you don't need as much of it. So to start your seeds off, if you want to use a seed starting mix, I would recommend doing it in these smaller little containers first, and then up potting with a more traditional potting mix as they get a little bit bigger. Now another recommendation that I have is definitely mark or label your seed starts, because you will forget what you planted in these if you're planting different things. So there's a lot of options for markers. One of the cheapest is popsicle sticks. You just write on these with a permanent marker, stick them down in your little pots, and you're good to go. They also have these little plastic plant labels that you can use. They have some that also look like sticks. You can get fancy and use a little decorative one if you want. Regardless, I would just say definitely label what you've planted, because you are going to forget that. Another thing that I recommend is keeping a journal of your stuff that you plant. You don't have to keep it in anything fancy like this. This is just mine that I use. But the important thing is to document the date that you plant your stuff, whether it is starting from seed or planting in your garden, so that way you can go back next year, see when you planted everything, write down your successes and failures and the things that worked out for you this year. You can follow those same practices next year. So we're going to go ahead and put our seed starting media in here and plant our seeds. So let me get like a handful of it here, and you can see how thin this is. So this is what you want in a seed starting mix. You want something that is light and fluffy and that will be easy for your seeds to germinate up through. So we are going to go ahead and fill our little pots with this stuff, and I'll be right back. And I would pick like the larger materials out that you see of this. Just anything that's going to obstruct the path of your seeds, I'd pick that stuff out. Which this kind of mix, since it was formulated for seed starting, really doesn't have a lot of that stuff in it. So that is the benefit to using this type of mix. It's already relatively free of any obstructions. So I'm just using this half today because that's all I'm going to plant. But we're going to start with our jalapeno peppers, which also I'm gonna start with a plant marker, like I said. So what I'm gonna write on here is just the variety. Alternatively, you can write the date that you start these two, but I am gonna actually write that in my journal so that I know. So as you can see, I really don't have a ton of these seeds, but the way that I would typically do this is because these cells are so tiny, I would just put maybe 3 to 4 seeds in each one, because on your sample packs, you really don't know what the germination rate is. Most typical seed packs really don't tell you the germination rate either. So just to ensure that I get some that germinate, I'm going to plant about 3 to 4 in each cell, and then as they germinate, I'm just going to keep maybe 1 or 2 of the little seedlings, whichever ones look strongest to me, and then I'm going to pick off the other ones so that they have room to grow in this little cell. So these seeds, pepper seeds, are very, very small, right? So generally that means we don't have to plant them very deep. So because I only have about 5 of these, I'm just going to stick them all in one little cell. I'm going to push them down a little bit. Now you don't want to compact your soil either, so I'm going to push them just barely under the soil. And cover them up a little bit. So there's that. I'm going to stick this in there so that I can remember what I planted. And then that little cell is going to grow me some early jalapenos if I'm lucky. So I'm going to do the same thing with my tomato seeds. These are yellow pear tomatoes. I'm going to make my plant marker so that I don't forget what these are. Now, I have about 5 of those as well. And as you can see, tomato seeds are even smaller than pepper seeds. So that just tells me I don't need to plant them very deep. So the size of your seed, really corresponds with how deep you have to plant them. If they're tiny, tiny seeds, you don't have to plant them very deep. If they're bigger seeds like squash, you might plant them just a tiny bit deeper. But overall, you really don't have to plant seeds very deep. So I'm going to just sprinkle all of those in there since I only have 5. Push them down just the tiniest little bit, and then I'm done. So put my plant marker in there, and I know that is my yellow pear tomato. Now I'm going to sow probably a few more herbs than I did these 3, obviously, because I didn't have a whole lot of cells. I didn't have a whole lot of seeds for these. So basil comes with a very large pack of seeds. Generally, it is recommended that you buy seeds for the year that you're growing them. However, I really don't see a need in purchasing a new pack of basil seeds. So to remedy these being just a little bit older, I believe they're a few years old, I am going to put more seeds to a cell just so that I can make sure I have germination in these cells. Now, basil and most herb seeds are very, very tiny. They're much tinier than the tomato and pepper seeds that we just planted. So I'm going to do relatively the same thing, except I'm probably going to put just a small pinch of seeds in each pot since they're so tiny. So I'm going to designate this whole section right here to basil. And for reference, I'm putting about 6 to 8 seeds in each little cell. Just because they are a little bit older, I don't know how good they are going to germinate. Now, instead of pushing these down, I'm just going to take some more of my seed starting mix and cover these up, because they're very, very small. They don't need to be pushed down very far. So this whole tray is dedicated to basil, this little section right here. Now, what does all of this stuff need? What do my seeds need to germinate? They definitely need water, so that's what we're going to do now. And the way that these trays are designed is to bottom water. So I'm going to just flip that little empty one over. And I'm going to pour some water in the bottom of this tray. Now typically you would need more water than that. This is what I have, but the idea of this is that it's going to soak up the water. It's going to soak up the water through these little holes here in the bottom of these trays. So your water is going to come up through the bottom of the pot and get to that seed that way. Now you can also maybe mist some water on the top to allow that to allow the two to kind of wick together if you want to. I would maybe suggest doing that, wetting them a little bit on the top. Now don't drown them in water. Don't take like a big watering can and just go to town, but I would maybe moisten it a little bit on the top, or alternatively just make sure that your seed starting mix is already moist and you don't have to do that. But definitely you want to water from the bottom and keep the moisture up as they germinate. Now another thing that seeds need is light to germinate. So I'm going to show you what Miss Ashley has over here. This is what she has made for a grow light, and it just has the fluorescent bulb in it. It is hanging from this stand, but the important thing is that you want to locate your lamps about 5 to 8 inches from your foliage and operate them about 12 to 18 hours a day. So if you use supplemental lights like grow lights, which I would recommend because sunlight is very inconsistent, you can do the cool or warm fluorescent lights and just keep them very close to your foliage, because what happens is as they germinate, if the light is too far from them, they grow weak and a little bit spindly trying to get to that light source. So you just want to make sure your light is very close to your plants. Now, one of the mistakes that I just realized I made is I put very tall plant markers on here. So I'm going to have to change those out. But the idea of this is the dome actually covers this and retains all of your heat and your moisture in this. But as I said in the beginning, you definitely want to remove this cover once you see germination so that it doesn't do overkill on your seeds. Now, some parting tips for caring for your newly emerged seedlings is that you want to fertilize when the second true leaves appear. So you can fertilize by like a liquid fertilizer such as 20-20-20, or with a liquid fish emulsion, but just make sure that you follow the rates recommended on the packaging whenever you use, and then fertilize again in another week or two. You also want to place your seed container or your newly planted seeds in a relatively warm place. So you can buy something like a heat mat for seed germination. Peppers really like heat to germinate, or you can just put them in a warm area of your house. So A really good way that I've seen people do it is put their seed trays on top of their refrigerator or like a chest freezer where it's already a little bit warm. You don't want it to be too warm, but that is about the ideal warm temperature that you want. Just don't forget about your seeds and keep them watered so that that moisture level remains constant. Another thing that you want to do is when your seedlings have emerged and they're around a few weeks old and they're getting taller, you're going to want to thin those out, and you're going to want to up pot them to allow that root development to happen. So as you can see, these are not very deep and they're not going to allow a lot of growth for root development. These are excellent for starting seeds, but you want to move them into a bigger container as they grow. Now, before you put your transplants in the ground, you also want to harden them off first. Now, the process of hardening them off is, if you grow them in a greenhouse, they are used to those perfectly maintained conditions, right? By hardening off your transplants, you are slowly getting them used to the outdoor growing conditions. So I would suggest maybe just carrying your little plant tray outside, setting it outside during the day, and then bringing them back in at night, just to get them used to the weather, the temperatures, and all of that before you put them in the garden so that they don't experience a lot of shock. Now, I definitely couldn't cover everything today that I wanted to, but everything else that I didn't cover is actually in this book. So we actually have hard copies of this book at the Extension office. It is called ID 128, Home Vegetable Gardening in Kentucky. It has everything in here that you need to get started in your own garden. It lists information about some popular varieties, different types of vegetables, insect control, composting, seed starting, container gardening. Everything that you could possibly want to know about gardening is in this book. So I encourage you to stop by the Extension office and check this out. Also, check out our other gardening videos and Miss Ashley's gardening videos that she's already put up for 4-H. If you have any questions related to home gardening in general, give me a call at the Extension office. Thank you for watching.